Ever since the days of Zoo Tycoon, we have been used to seeing species and subspecies being treated equal in our zoo games, which is also the case in Planet Zoo. Now Planet Zoo 2 has been teased, and something I really hope to see in this upcoming game is a new and optimized take on subspecies. With a sequel for Planet Zoo dropping next year, one of the hot topics is of course which animals from the first game will make it into Planet Zoo 2 and which brand new additions will we see coming along with them. Looking at the sequels from Frontier's other games, Planet Coaster and Jurassic World Evolution, it is safe to assume a lot of well-known animals and even items will make it from the first game to the sequel, but some stuff will also be left out. And with more than 200 animals to choose from in Planet Zoo, I doubt every single one of them will make it into Planet Zoo 2 from day one, especially when we also need room for new additions. Even more so if the doors for flying birds and fully aquatic species finally are to be opened. While which species to save and which to leave behind is a huge debate, I feel like there is one area where we might be able to free some room in the roster without actually losing any options. I think we need a different take on subspecies. It must be possible to come up with a system where one species does not end up being represented multiple times when looking through the Zoopedia or the animal market. And speaking of subs, make sure to subscribe to the channel. If we look at these 10 animals, we are in fact only looking at 5 species. Yet they will in the game appear as 10 different animals on an equal level to these 10 different species here. I think this is a bit unfair, especially since the animals over here all are species which also contain multiple subspecies. These could in theory also have been represented by multiple options. And before you jump to any conclusions, no, I'm not just going to suggest that we just cut half of these away and let every animal only be represented on a species level to make it equal for all. Instead, I'll suggest we take some inspiration from one of Frontier's other titles, Jurassic World Evolution. The reason why I don't want to just cut these additional subspecies away is because I can see the value in having multiple options of a species, depending on the type of zoo you are making, where in the world it is located, and just to make things less repetitive. Although when going with multiple subspecies of a species, it needs to be done for the right species and with the right choices of subspecies, which is not the case for all of these. What I want to do is to make subspecies more like the variant options we know from Jurassic World Evolution, where we for some creatures can choose between various designs, although we might need to make some small changes to make the system work in Planet Zoo. Doing it this way would mean the subspecies would require less work to add to the game than the actual species, since they would more become an option for something which is already there. I think implementing subspecies this way would save some time and work when it comes to the Zoopedia, the animations and the design. Let us use the brown bear as an example and start by looking at the Zoopedia. In Planet Zoo we currently have this species represented by 2 subspecies in the form of the grizzly bear and the Himalayan brown bear. We could remove these 2 from the Zoopedia and instead just add a spot called brown bear, maybe with some small pictures or a symbol added next to the image to indicate we got subspecies to explore here. The current first page or general information page could mostly stay the same, but with a body of text which describes the species as a whole. The scientific name and the conservation status should also be on a species level. If we then somewhere, potentially by clicking on the name on top, could get the option to switch to a specific subspecies. Clicking on one of these should add a third name to the scientific name, and the conservation status will change to match the subspecies, and a new text about this specific subspecies will appear. In most cases, the text would just be shorter than it would be for the species as a whole. If all the tabs up here will remain exactly the same in the sequel is hard to say, but for the sake of the example, I'll assume they will. Page 2, called Natural Habitat, I will also twist a little. For the map, I'll do as you often see on scientific illustrations, and make each subspecies have their own color, although we of course won't be getting every single subspecies there is. This isn't the Zoo Tycoon reboot after all. So I'll use a more neutral color to fill out the remaining areas the species also covers. Now that we established some colors for each subspecies, we can use these colors again to highlight the facts true to each subspecies. Under continents we can see every continent the brown bear is found in, but a colored line will tell you where the in-game subspecies are found. The same could be done under regions, but I hope they might reconsider this category since it tends to be inconsistent and with mistakes. With biomes we can again line up all the biomes matching the species, and then make a colored frame around those fitting the subspecies. Habitat requirements might be more tricky to deal with, especially since I'm less sure this will remain the same in the next game. But for most species I don't see the big reason for differences between the subspecies. They're pretty close to the same anyway. Page 3 is for species data. If we look at the text over here, it almost says the same for both subspecies, with some numbers just being a bit different. I think this should be doable on a species level, and if there is anything only true to some subspecies, it can probably be pointed out in a short sentence. Looking at the social needs, they will in most cases also come so close that there really shouldn't be a reason for differences here. Size and weight is where you more often will see some differences between subspecies. So again I would use colors to point these out. The same can be done under life cycle when needed. Page 4 is for research. If this gameplay feature remains like this is speculative, but I think it would make sense to just do the research on a species level. I really don't see a reason why some enrichment items should only be used by one of the subspecies. This has probably been done to make the animals feel more unique, but since the point of this is to make these variations take up less space and less work from the team behind, then we don't really want differences in the way they interact with these items. For the fun facts, the facts true for the species as a whole can be written in green as they are now, and then some facts only true for the subspecies can be added using the colors from before. Next tab is interspecies enrichment. This function has always been quite inconsistent. Sometimes the mixes seems to be based on real zoos, other times on overlap in nature, and sometimes there seems to be a different reason behind. No clear logic here. From a behavioral standpoint, there shouldn't really be much differences in which subspecies you mix with other animals. But if you consider overlap in nature, then there of course will. I don't want to go further into this speculation, since I just think this system needs to be done differently. Now the Zoopedia ended up being quite a big post here, even though it is probably not the most important part of this whole rethinking of subspecies. I just found it interesting to talk about. Where it's probably more important to cut away some work for the team behind is when it comes to animations and design. As I talked a bit about before, it seems like the logic Frontier often has used when adding animals and DLCs similar to those we already got in the game is to make sure each of them has some unique animations which will make them seem more different from one another, even though they might appear visually alike. And I understand this logic, and it for sure also makes sense for species which have some unique or iconic behaviors which their relatives might not display. This is just rarely the case between two subspecies of the same species. I'm totally fine with both brown bears behaving exactly the same, and the same goes should they add a third. But if we then compare different species of bear to the brown bears, well then it would likely need a few or more unique behaviors to make it appear a bit more like its own thing. But this will always be depending on which animals we're talking about. It is a bit of the same story with the design. We of course need to be able to tell the subspecies apart from each other for this to be interesting. And here we are back to the Jurassic World evolution approach with variants. The differences between the subspecies will often be a matter of size, body mass and or colors, so this should be noticeable in most cases. Sometimes more changes are needed and other times less. It again all depends on the animal. In many cases you could probably also reuse a juvenile model between subspecies with even less changes than for the adult animals. As mentioned before, I think we can save time on the animations and coding for enrichment items and similar. But the same could probably also be true for the sound design in most cases. And if we really manage to take away some of the workload and are able to make the subspecies take up less space in the game than the species do, then we might also be able to get more of them, without it feeling like they're stealing the spot from something else. Because now the subspecies has almost become a bit more like a complicated color variation. And we have seen a lot of color variations being added for our existing animals with free updates for Planet Zoo over the time. That is part of what I hope to achieve by suggesting less work should be put into subspecies than regular species. Although it of course shouldn't be overdone like it was in that Zoo Tycoon reboot Frontier also was involved with. There is no value in having 7 different subspecies of jaguars to choose from. But there is value in having a brown bear fitting your North American zoos and one fitting European parks. In some cases, 3 or maybe even more subspecies for one animal might make sense, if they all bring something unique in terms of appearance, range or maybe conservation status. The grey wolf being perhaps the best example here with its many subspecies. Maybe we could even see like a default or generic version for each of the animals which features subspecies. We kind of already got this for the grey wolf, or timber wolf as the game calls it. This way, if you just don't care about using a specific subspecies, or the subspecies in the game just don't match the type of zoo you're working on, then the default species might be a better option, and in some cases might even be the more realistic choice, the lion being a good example here. While I pointed out these animals as being the ones with multiple subspecies in the game, then we do have plenty of animals who are only represented as a specific subspecies, without any alternatives, like our lion being the West African lion. I believe they went with this lion to build up some lore in the Planet Zoo universe, since we know from the first campaign that Bernie established a breeding program for this specific lion.
And prides, thanks to a lion breeding program we ran in the 80s.
And therefore it is now somewhat common in captivity within this universe, to the annoyment of the many players who want to base their zoos on real life and not see it as part of the Planet Games universe. Because in real life you can almost not find this lion anywhere outside of Nigeria. Instead, most of the lions you see in real zoos are actually not of a specific subspecies. They have been mixed along the way. Therefore a default option for the lion on top of a subspecies or 2 would make a lot of sense to have to satisfy the realistic minded players. Before ending this video, I need to make sure you don't misunderstand me here. Because you might have seen me in the past criticizing the original Malayan tapir for just being a reskin of the bird's tapir, or you might have seen me criticizing the sifaka for behaving too much like our other lemurs. The big difference here is, what I've been suggesting here today has only been when talking about subspecies, since 2 subspecies within a species in most cases will be much more alike than 2 related species. There might be cases where this could work on a species level, but I think we need to draw the line somewhere, otherwise we end up with a mess like we saw in the Zoo Tycoon reboot. All in all, what I'm hoping to see is a system where we cut down on the time and work spent on subspecies by letting them share pages on the Zoopedia, by reusing most or all of the animations, while still keeping the necessary variations in the animal design without being afraid of reusing some models when it makes sense. What I'm suggesting here is not flawless, and some tweaks to it might be needed, but I'm hoping to see a solution in Planet Zoo 2 where we can keep subspecies in the game to add even more value and replayability to some animals, but at the same time make sure these subspecies don't feel like they take time and space away from more unique additions to the game. I hope you got my point here, and let me know what you think of it. Maybe you got even better ideas than I do. Make sure to like the video if you enjoyed it, and I'm for sure not done talking about Planet Zoo 2, so make sure to subscribe to the channel for more. Thank you for stopping by.